Welcome in, everyone. Hang on a second. Okay. Sorry about that. If there was anyone in here when that happened, sorry about that. I accidentally had the audio over to my computer instead of my headset. And so you guys would have been hearing the game. Through not only my OBS studios capturing it, but you would have been hearing the game through my microphone too, and that would have been annoying for you guys and me. But hey, thanks for joining me. Usually if we're going to have a good stream, it has an awkward beginning. That's how it goes around here. And so today, we're going to be looking deep into Open Theism. Now, if you've been watching the channel for a while, we've had many discussions with Open Theists. Some of the popular ones today, even Idol Killer and Inyart Theology, had many discussions with those fellows. But more often than not, when we talk to them, we end up trying to explain misunderstandings in our position instead of dealing with something that they're actually, positively presenting. Maybe turn the sound down a little. And so, we end up not learning a lot about Open Theism during those discussions. And so today, this is what I've done. When I was making those Skyrim videos, I kept getting accused of being AI because of my voice. So I got Gemini Pro, and I asked Gemini Pro to give me the best stillman argument for Open Theism, specifically in the realm of the mechanics of the future and the what they call dynamic omniscience. And so Gemini Pro really doesn't play around, man. If you don't understand so it's not like Gemini is going to come up with some arguments for Open Theism like it's a person. If you don't understand, it's a large language model. Okay? And so what it does is, in this case, it has researched 66 scholarly articles in relation to positive presentation of Open Theism. If you guys want to see those sources, I can actually easily get those and add them to the description. So just let me know in the comments if that's something you're interested in, and I can just do it. So I felt like somebody just knocked on the door or something. Hang on, guys. 1 second. Okay, so no knock at the door, but my headset can kind of make sounds muffled, and we have big blocks of ice outside right now. Somebody was knocking the ice off of their I forgot how to do something I need to remember how to do before we get started here. Okay, yeah. So we got to fertilize this field here. Plant some flaxseed. The good thing about this game, as opposed to Skyrim for these discussions, which I'm going to be looking at the chat in just a second, and we're going to read through Gemini's whole argument here, and it's actually probably going to take us a while, to be honest with you, because it's a very thorough research. I was actually very surprised at how thorough it was. And the good thing about playing this game while having these discussions as opposed to Skyrim is that, you know, everything that you do in this game is like really menial tasks. And when I get into Skyrim, it's just so much activity. I mean, we're still going to play Skyrim every now and then and stuff, but for these discussions, I think we'll switch here, and we can even get some other people playing if you guys are interested in that too, because this can be co-op. But you can go into a crafting mode, and I did not do fast crafting, so sometimes long crafting sessions can take several minutes, and then during that time we are going to be reading Gemini's Stillman of Open Theism. And ultimately the question is, as you see, is the future open? That's what the thumbnail has. And that's one of the questions. Another question, is, according to this doctrine they have called dynamic omniscience. Now, I'm actually not even going to make an attempt at describing dynamic omniscience in my own words in this, because, like I said, Gemini has arranged it all very well. And so I'm actually just going to read exactly what Gemini Pro found from these sources, and then we're just gonna dig into it and talk about it as we go. So thanks for being here. We're gonna finish this field up and wait for some people to roll in so that we can have some people who are alive when we get started reading Gemini's stuff. It's basically I guess you could call 5 points, I think. I'll put a summary. I put the 7th section of Gemini's thing is the summary, and I put that up on a post if you want to go check that out right now while I'm finishing it up and we're waiting on people to come in here. I hope that the algorithm will push this out to some open theists. I tried to appeal to their group a little bit in the description and all that, so hopefully that will work out. We'll get some discussion going on in here. Now, so what we're doing in the game is we're getting some flaxseed down. And I just want to hurry up and get that down, because it's the most important thing. It's the most expensive thing. If you're just selling it outright, it's the most important thing if you're a blacksmith, because so many items use it. Because you make, cloth, linen, or whatever. Anyway, so while we're just doing this, we will talk about it, and I'm reading the chat too right now, so feel free to say hello out there and like the video and hit that hype button. I guess is a new thing which has come around since the last time I've been doing YouTube. But so yeah, no script tonight, guys, other than what I'm reading from the AI. And we'll go through that piece by piece. I imagine it's going to take us a few streams to finish it. It's very thorough. The first, it has it categorized in different categories of argument. And there are a few scriptures that really just make open theism obsolete. It really does. And we'll get into that more, but Isaiah 41 is one of them, where God literally says that one of the tests for you to know that whether you're dealing with God or not is if he knows the future and he can tell it to you. So I mean, it's just, open theism is just done as soon as he says that. But anyway, we'll still humor the rest of their structure, you know what I mean, because it's fun. We're all nerds here because they got a whole structure together. Okay, that field is done. Now on the game here, like I said, we can get some people joined in eventually. And in my settlement here, if you would like to play, I've got it maxed out on the season length. It's 30 days per season, and that's crazy, by the way. That's 10 times the starting number of days per season. The default is 3 days per season. So I'm going to actually take a look now at Gemini's first little thing here. I'm going to open that up. Okay, I've got that up on my phone now so that I can read it to you guys, and I need to probably turn the audio down a little bit more, huh? Hard to tell for me. You guys just let me know. Definitely want to get skilled farmer. Extra crops harvested. Maybe I turn the... It's hard to get the audio right. Okay, let's just read the first thing here really quick. That's why I maxed out the season days, so it doesn't really matter if we stand here for a little bit. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's supposed to be only 3 days, and now it's 30. As you can see, I've played a few days already. So I'm going to start out with the introduction here of Gemini's Stillman argument for open theism. The introduction for it is labeled The Crisis of Sovereignty and the Open View. The theological landscape of evangelicism has been significantly reshaped in recent decades by the emergence of open theism, also known as free will theism or the open view of God. This theological movement challenges the classical consensus regarding the nature of divine foreknowledge and the ontology of the future, proposing that the future is not a settled reality exhaustively known by God, but rather a realm of possibilities partially determined by the free decisions of moral agents. Partially determined. Right? That's an important distinction. To effectively engage with and refute this position from a biblical worldview, it's funny that Gemini made that distinction, that's funny. One must first understand it not as a mere deviation from orthodoxy, but as a robust, internally consistent system grounded in specific hermeneutical commitments. That's important. It's grounded in very specific hermeneutical commitments and metaphysical theories. This report provides an exhaustive analysis of the open theist position, articulating its strongest arguments in the domains of philosophy, biblical exegesis, and systematic theology. Okay. So there was a few things in that I called out. I think the joke it made, which is probably just trying to make me feel good, is saying that it was the biblical worldview is versus it. You know what I mean? Because AI doesn't know that, but it knows me because I'm the one asking it, and it knows my previous input. I always think about stuff like that, how the language model gets its various excursions from that make it seem more like a person might be saying it. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. That the world is a realm of possibilities that are partially determined by the free will of moral agents. Now, I don't know if you saw the various ways that we are supporting that in the post, but it has different categories and it wants to make some distinctions first, and so we're going to take a look at that really quick. So the first thing is defining the core tenets. At the heart of open theism is the assertion of a dynamic omniscience. So that's the heart of open theism. Dynamic omniscience. Unlike the static omniscience of classical theism, where God knows the future as a settled script of actualities, open theism posits that God knows reality exactly as it is, the past as settled, the present as occurring, and the future as a domain of possibilities. Proponents such as Clark Pinnock, John Sanders, Gregory Boyd, and William Hasker argue that this view is the only one that preserves the genuine nature of libertarian free will. Okay. And the integrity of the biblical narrative, describing a God who responds to, interacts with, and occasionally changes his mind because of human action. So this is why Leighton Flowers is so much like an open theist, because this philosophical / attempt at being biblical argument is just another attempt at bringing the philosophy of free will into the biblical worldview and then making it internally consistent with the narrative of Scripture. That's what the attempt is. Now, of course, they have to make very specific philosophical commitments. They have to make very specific hermeneutical commitments to make that work. And that's what we're going to be going through as we continue. Now, I do remember that the very first idea that it wanted to present was a metaphysical argument. And so we'll probably spend most of our time on that today. We'll probably do it a section at a time, like a category of argument at a time, because this stuff is pretty deep. And so we've got the background of the game to kind of stop and digest it a little bit as we go, so that we're not, it's more of a relaxed environment. And then later, of course, what I intend on doing is kind of later picking out the more intense, more like the reading and breaking it into different sections and then submitting it as a edited video. Look over in the chat and see how many we have in here right now. Hey guys, how's it going? Hey Veka, what's going on? Sugoi, how's it going? Yeah, we're going to be taking a look at this argument today. We don't get to learn a lot about open theism because they're always just saying crazy stuff about us. So the movement is often misunderstood as denying God's omniscience. Open theists rigorously reject this characterization. They argue that God knows everything that is knowable. That's an important distinction. Everything that is knowable. If the future does not exist as a settled reality, and that's an ontological claim, by the way, the ontological nature of the future, they're saying that it doesn't exist right now as a settled reality, then it is not knowable as a settled fact, which obviously the Bible clearly refutes that in many places with prophecy, just in general. But therefore, God's lack of knowledge regarding specific future free acts is not a limitation of his cognitive power, but a reflection of the nature of reality itself. This redefinition shifts the debate from the scope of God's knowledge to the content that is available to him in reality. Right? The content that's available, because the future doesn't exist yet. And that's actually a scientifically ridiculous statement to even say. It really is. Before we go into, like, it's going to explain what their, position is on that more detail. But before we do, I mean, what now is occurring? For example, this is now for you right now, right? But if me and you say now at the same time, guess what? You're saying it probably 45 seconds into my future, because there's a time delay between us. Right? So even if we timed it exactly right, according to you, when I said now, that was in the past, right? Even though I'm live. So what now is happening right now? What, according to what time segment? Like what, 1 second is now? And so, does God only know 0.99 seconds into the future? Like, is it exactly 1 second? And where do you get these ideas from? You know what I mean? So it just instantly falls apart when you consider what time actually is, which is, God tells us that the sun goes up, it goes all the way around, it's one day, right? And that's how we know what time is. And we just kind of break that down into different categories. And hey, though, as science has improved, we figured out other ways of calculating time. Like, we can use quantum time, light speed. We could use light speed as a universal standard of time instead of the sun rotating around one of the planets that exists in the grand universe. That's one thing we could do. Anyway, so which now is happening right now? That's important. So that's kind of, hopefully the position will attempt to explain that part. How they measure now. Okay. Checking out the chat really quick. Hey, what's up, guys? Hudson 7. Time didn't exist before the sun and moon. Let's see. Does time even exist? I don't know. I think time is more of an illusion of matter that can have perspective, is noticing that other matter is changing, and then you are calculating the frequency at which you're noticing other matter change, and then you're smart enough to categorize that into a list of segmented time sequences. That's what I think. So I don't know what you're trying to say, honestly, man. It's just kind of on a different line of reasoning. I don't think time is really actually real. It's kind of like an illusion that God put into place to make time feel real. But anyway, 1.2 is called the distinction from process theology. So it wants to draw a distinction here. A critical nuance often missed in polemics is the distinction between open theism and process theology. While both reject the classical attributes of immutability and impassibility in their absolute forms, open theism maintains a commitment Okay. To creatio ex nihilo, creation out of nothing, and God's transcendent sovereignty. So, okay, open theism, that's one thing to note. They maintain a commitment to that, which, I mean, okay. So, yeah, dude, that honestly, that immediately makes their position contradictory. If you believe that God created matter ex nihilo, then how is God bound by time? If time is just, you know, changes in matter, how fast can light go? Okay, I'll multiply that out. How many times? All right, that's a day. How fast does the sun move around the earth? All right, multiply that by 30. That's a month, right? So is God bound by those things? That he created the things who that change to manipulate reality in such a way that that illusion is in effect, right? Being able to calculate changes in matter to produce time in various tables, right? But because we have science now, we don't only use the sun. We could use like an absolute time for the universe. If we found another civilization, we could say, okay, well, okay, light moves this fast, and we met each other on this day, so this is day one, and we'll multiply it out by whatever, but the speed of light is the standard. I'm just giving an example of another way that we could do time other than just watching the sun. Because God told us to measure time that way, so we do that. But is time really real? Or are these objects just rotating each other and we're counting it? And matter is changing also at the same time in various ways, like your body is decaying, for example. Like your cells are replenishing themselves as a change is happening. All that. Anyway, let's see what the chat has to say right now. Pinnock said God's grace is extended to all, enabling them to receive God's love. Like a wide receiver, right? You just receive it. You go long. That's what it means to receive it, right? I'm with you, Sugoi. Good to see you, man. As the table illustrates, so there's a table up here, but obviously you can't see that. Open theism positions itself as a via media. What is that? A middle way. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Okay, just what we said before. Why you can get it confused for provisionism, because it's attempting to retain the transcendence of classical theism while adopting the relational dynamism often associated with process thought, but without succumbing to process theology's metaphysical limitations on God. So it's another way of trying to support libertarian free will. It's an entire structure of theology in an attempt to make libertarian free will possible in reality. Right? Because that's the thing, you have to have an internal structure. But I proved over the last couple weeks during my Skyrim lore videos and stuff, you can have a internally consistent structure in fiction. Like having an internally consistent structure doesn't make it true. Now, of course, it won't be anything that's not true won't be internally consistent on all fronts. It may appear to be that way on enough to where it seems plausible until further inspection. But Okay, so we're getting into the first argument here, where we'll probably spend most of our time today. Hudson 777 said, "Is God talking to Moses through the burning bush right now?" No, of course not. What do you mean? Okay. So the first part of the metaphysical foundation is time, truth, and freedom. The intellectual durability of open theism lies in its sophisticated metaphysical arguments. I think that's interesting phrasing. I don't know if I would really call it sophisticated, but let's see why it's sophisticated. These arguments are designed to show that the classical view of exhaustive, definite foreknowledge, okay, is logically incompatible with human freedom. Okay, well, so
do not get too close to them.
Why is human freedom the standard that exhaustive, definite foreknowledge needs to be compatible with? What shouldn't it be the opposite? Like, God knows everything, obviously, and always has. But why is our standard the human freedom? That doesn't make sense. Not to me. I don't think that it's ever been proven from Scripture that human freedom is described in any way, at least in the way that they, What human freedom? What is that? What is human freedom? And why do we need to prove that it exists with theology? I don't understand. So, not only logically incompatible with human freedom, but the nature of time itself. Okay? So the ontology of time, presentism versus eternalism.
It never rains, but it pours.
It says the debate over foreknowledge is fundamentally a debate over the nature of time. Open theists almost universally adopt the A theory of time, or presentism. Presentism asserts that only the present moment is ontologically real. The past existed, but exists no longer. The future will exist, but does not exist yet. Okay. Again, if you're going to make a claim like that, you have to have an exact measurement of time, and you have to have where it comes from. You know what I mean? So how much of that is considered now? I don't know, man. Of course, they're not thinking of it rationally, so they're not going to go that far, like we would, to like just hammer out every single last detail of it. They're not going to go that far to like have a measurement of time. They're like, this is now. This is the only now that actually exists. This is the only block of reality that actually exists. These milliseconds or whatever it is. You know what I mean? You got to have something if you're going to make that claim. Or are you just going to say we don't know? Okay. Then how do you know that to begin with if you don't know? Because you have to have something that led to that idea, starting with the measurement of time, which is now, for God, right? It's a rainy day, so this guy, I haven't done a lot here. I don't even have any settlers yet. Just built like the basic buildings, and I've just been kind of doing my own thing out here. Just planted some stuff. 1 second though. Hudson said, so God has a past? No. The world has a past, right? History has a past. And God acted at various points in history. Pretending to not understand that is not an argument. You understand that. The first point is the reality of passage. According to Open Theists, who argue that our experience of time as a flow is veridical, not illusory. Okay? The future is nothing until it becomes the present. Okay? Well, again, I don't think there is an answer from them on my question, or it would probably have it here as an explanation, but it says they critique the B theory, eternalism, the view that past, present, and future are equally real coordinates in a space-time block, as unbiblical and philosophical fatalism. Fatalism? People that say that that's fatalism don't understand what they even mean by that. They really don't. Because fatalism is like a philosophy that you could possibly subjectively come to in a deterministic worldview. It doesn't have to be a part of it. It's only, fatalism is something that you come to like subjectively. Of course, the only thing is it has to be a deterministic worldview for fatalism to be relevant, of course, but it's not in like a biblical worldview of someone who believes that biblical worldview. That person would never come to fatalism. Okay, so basically, if presentism is true, then there are no future facts waiting to be known. For God to know the future as settled would require the future to be settled. If the future is non-existent, God knows it as it is. A probabilistic cloud of might be and could be, but not will be. Nah, that's crazy on its head, man. Immediately. That's immediately just crazy, not biblical in any sense of the word. Because, okay, so you're telling me in Isaiah 53, when God described the passion of the Christ and what it would be like, that could just be different. That's not a solid fact. Right, that's not a fact. I mean, that's what it says. That there are no future facts waiting to be known. Like they don't exist yet. So, what is it like? Jesus will become the suffering Messiah if you let me, or something like that? What is it? I don't get that part. How do any prophecies work if they are not historically future facts for God? Like, right, to speak at his discretion. Right, I'm not saying that you could come to a historically accurate future fact. I mean, you could, but not with infallibility. So I've heard them support these ideas in Scripture when they say things like, what was I about to do? When they say things like, when God is telling someone, if you do this, then this, right? And then, or God said he repented of what he was going to do to them, changed his mind. They think that God's saying that, like telling someone to write that down, like that is the decree. God's not like telling his decree when he's saying that. Right? That's outside of time. That's out in his dimension, out in his mind. That's not on the page of the Bible where he told him to write down that I repent of what I was going to do to them. Right? That's a moment in time where he's choosing to interact with a human being, and he's using the context of that human being's understanding of reality, right? It's not like he's going to expect the prophet to suddenly come outside of his understanding of reality into an eternal perspective to understand like things from the perspective of God, in the sense that like in an eternal sense, like your thoughts are higher than, like his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. Not anymore. All right, that's what that's alluding to. We can just get right up there with those thoughts. C. Ballin said, finite creatures can drive themselves crazy thinking about eternal. Yeah, exactly. Just even try to sit and think about what it means for God to have no beginning. What does that really mean? You know, can you fathom it? Of course you can't. You can sit there all night and just continue. All right, well, I guess no, that couldn't because it was right before that, before that, before that, before that. You know, you drive yourself crazy just continually thinking of a moment before that moment that God existed. You know what I mean? And it's just not even relevant. It's not even relevant. Moments aren't even relevant before God creates time. I'm trying to go out, and so in the early game here, the best thing to do is just hunt a bunch of animals and turn their leather into small bags and sell that. It's the best low-level items to sell and make. It used to be just make stone sickles, either for 50 gold a piece or silver, or just make knives, but they nerfed it. And it was a good idea to nerf it, but they nerfed it so that you didn't get that much money from those items. But you still get 7 gold piece per leather bag, so that works out pretty good. And you get the meat, so you don't have to buy meat or anything. Oh, there's a wolf. It's always fun coming over here from Skyrim, because of course when you come here from Skyrim, you're basically an expert at the bow. How about that, Mr. Wolf? You like that? Okay. Now, whenever we do a hunt here, this is going to be important to get into this rhythm for our stream. Whenever we finish our hunt and we can go back and make our leather bags, that's going to take several minutes to go through all the leather. And then during that time, I can read more of the AI. I can read more of the Gemini Pro's Open Theism. Still, man. They were always telling me to try to still man Open Theism. Well, it's kind of hard when all you guys ever do is straw man us, and you don't ever really present your own position very well. This is what we really need, the Wysint. Oh, this is a wolf. Come on, man. It's ridiculous. I feel like those wolves were really strong. Here comes the wolves. Stop for a second, man. I barely made it out of that. And I'm actually out of arrows, so I better head back. That's good. We got a lot of materials that we can sit there and craft, and then we can read more of the Open AI thing, or Gemini Pro thing. How many wolves am I going to run into? I feel like that's enough. But at least we're going to have a lot of meat to cook. so that's good. I mean, our backpack is pretty much full. Well, we don't have a backpack. We need to get a backpack. Now, again, I'm doing 30-day seasons, and that's crazy. Like, that is really long seasons. Seasons by default are 3 days. But I also greatly increased the needs of settlers. Long walk back to the house. In the meantime, while we're doing that, I guess I could read more of this right now. So, part 2.2 of the metaphysics argument that Gemini Pro came up with for Open Theism says one of the most, it's titled The Grounding Objection, the Achilles heel of Molinism. One of the most potent philosophical weapons in the open theist arsenal is the grounding objection. Directed primarily against Molinism, the view that God knows what free creatures would do in any hypothetical situation. That's middle knowledge. It's also just made up. This argument, championed by philosophers like William Hasker and Alan Rhoda, attacks the link between truth and reality. So, it's basically, can we imagine God to be a certain way so that we can make the world consistent with libertarian free will, this idea that we came up with all on our own, and we hope that one day we can make it consistent with the Bible. One of the ways that we do that is by modifying God's character and knowledge and the nature of time itself, just so that we can fit our own free will into the mix. That's really strange. Free will is this libertarian free will. That's the real core tenet of their theology. That's the thing that everything else must be measured by. Okay, time to make some roasted meat. We have a lot of it, so that's going to take a while. So for 60 pieces, it takes 3 minutes. Now next is the truth maker principle. The core premise is the truth maker principle. Truth supervenes on being. What? For a proposition to be true, there must be something in reality that makes it true. Oh, okay. The proposition: if Peter were placed in the courtyard, he would freely deny Jesus. The objection: what grounds the truth of this statement? It cannot be God's will, or Peter wouldn't be free. Gotcha. Okay. So they're saying that, you see, Peter's freedom is the ultimate foundational theological point that must remain intact no matter what. Everything else can go. Like, right? If God's will is the grounding truth, then it doesn't fit. Right? But see, here's the idea, though. Is God's grounding decree from outside of time? That is outside of time. That's not the grounding truth in universe that's causing it to happen. Right? Like, in universe, here in the game, he's not cooking roasted meat because I'm controlling the mouse and making him. He is cooking roasted meat because he is hungry and he needs to store food for the winter coming up. You know, like in universe. There's an in universe, and what I mean by that is material reality, right? That God created. The things that happen here inside of this reality have relevancy as far as grounding truths, like primary grounding truths in universe, such as, you know, let's go on here. It says, it cannot be Peter's nature, or it would be determined, not free. Okay. But again, that's their argument. So we need to somewhere in Scripture present this idea that man is free, for that to even be the core. They say that divine omniscience or dynamic omniscience is the core tenet. That's not true. Dynamic omniscience is just one technique of trying to prove their true core tenet, which is libertarian free will of humanity. It's a man-centered theology. Everything is based on that standard. Like, there's no possible universe where libertarian free will isn't the standard for theology for them. I don't know what that is. Well, because, you know, when we do stuff, we feel like we did it. Well, you know, we talked about just the other day how your brain is activating to make decisions before your conscious brain is aware of the decision that you are in the middle of making. You just become aware of it later, but now milliseconds later, of course, but still it matters. On an energetic level, it matters because there's portions of the brain that are not conscious that process decisions before the conscious brain becomes aware that those decisions have been processed. Like, and then because your conscious brain becomes aware of it, it assumes authorship, even though it's not true. The authorship began elsewhere in the brain. And then the brain was just simply informed of it. How am I cold? It's spring. Oh, it's raining outside. And it's nighttime. Okay, I'll give you that. Let's just go to sleep till the next day. Don't worry about it, man. Take a load off. see what we have out in the chat. Anybody saying anything? Not right now. We're going to make some leather bags here. Six. Well, where did all my... I thought I got a bunch of leather out there. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I just thought I did. Oh well. I guess we can just go out and keep getting more leather. Let's read this next part. Since the event hasn't happened, that being Peter's denial at the time of prophecy, I guess. Since the event hasn't happened, and the agent is free to do otherwise, according to what? According to what are they free to do otherwise? That's a question that I have for open theists. You're just imagining. Alright, that's a definition of libertarian free will. The capacity to do otherwise, or the ability to do otherwise. According to what do you have that ability to do otherwise other than what you are doing? That's just something, you know, you had just imagined that you could be doing other than you are doing, but you're not, though. What you're actually doing is what you're doing, plus imagining other things that you could be doing. You're not actually doing those things, though, right? You're just imagining them, and then you're also doing whatever you're doing. Maybe you're just sitting there in a chair imagining things, right? And then maybe you're just like a little kid, like you have such a strong imagination that you're just there. But really, in reality, what you're doing in real life is you're sitting there in a chair imagining things. And then, when you're done imagining things, you get up and you do things, right? You do something, right? Doesn't matter what else you imagined could possibly have come into reality. That's just a figment of the human imagination. It's irrelevant to reality, to history. How do you mean you could do otherwise? According to what? So, since the event hasn't happened and the agent is free to do otherwise, there is nothing in the universe that grounds the truth of this counterfactual. Actually, so what grounded the truth of it was not only Jesus saying it as a prophecy, which, I mean, that's good enough, but you have God's eternal decree grounding that as an eternal truth. So according to that logic, Jesus could say that he would deny him 3 times before the rooster crowed, and then that not happen. Well, then guess what? We have a huge theological problem, because then Jesus' sacrifice on the cross does not pay for our sins, because he's got that one where he lied that Peter would deny him 3 times before the rooster crowed. Right? Because that's a lie now if that didn't happen. And I guess you could say, but it did happen. But you're imagining all of these. Right? You're imagining that Peter could possibly not have done that. According to what? What's giving you that info that he could not have done that? You're just imagining a scenario where he didn't? What validity does that have in reality? It's just a scenario that your imaginative mind sat there and came up with. It means nothing. Always build up the experience first, the knowledge categories, so you get better experience. Yeah, we're going to keep hunting, and we need some more arrows for that. Because, man, we ran across a lot of wolves that time. Hopefully that doesn't happen again for a couple weeks. My arrows must be in my house. make sure we got extra weight dropped off here. Don't need that. Copper hoe. Don't need that torch. Don't need that axe. I could use some of these plantains though, just in case. Oh, my health is already at full. I am going to grab some food to take with me on the hunting trip. So maybe we can just go out and make a campfire out there somewhere when it gets dark. Okay, grab that, and let's take a look at what it costs to make a campfire. 16 sticks. Just go grab those real quick. Just spent all the gold that I've made. I spent all of it right before I started this stream, like way earlier yesterday. On it's not there. It's over here. All this flaxseed, 36 squares. Come next year, that'll be really great. Let's see, when is it exactly? Flaxseed, spring to summer? Okay. Just one season? Plant it in spring, get it in summer? That's nice. I forgot that it was that quick. So I have flax in the summer. That's good. Oh, look at that deer just right on the edge of my property. I'm gonna have to aim high on this one, I think. Like maybe there. I don't know if I hit him or not. So of course, they don't make the proper distinctions when they're trying to understand God's foreknowledge, or they would, you know, not have half the arguments with us that they do have. No one's saying that that humans aren't acting according to their own volition. Like humans don't have a, you know, desire to do the thing that they are about to do, which God has decreed they do. That's just the thing that, you know, the human mind can hardly wrap itself around God's creating a universe where all of these things are relevant. Like making a choice, for example, is relevant. All the universe has all the context necessary for that to be relevant, right? And yet God decreed everything that takes place in the universe, despite the fact that choice is intact. Now, I guess the libertarian free will people suppose that they are like some soul that is just completely disconnected from all circumstance, is making decisions from a place of complete abject neutrality. And that's just a fantasy. That's not reality in any way. Everyone knows it. Okay, this one went down on its own. Hmm. I need to hurry up and get Hunter's vision. That's really essential. How do I keep missing those shots? I guess I could try to sneak a little bit. Try to get a little closer. Oh well, I lost my dough. That's okay. Wait. They didn't do too bad with the Bow mechanics. I wish I could run into some... Oh, look at this. A copper axe. Oh, it's only at 19%. These mead bottles are probably worth something, though. Not really. Oh, they're empty. Gotcha. They're just bottles. Hey, Bo Douglas. Can you explain why the serpent in Genesis isn't Satan? I just saw your comment. Oh. Oh, the serpent isn't Satan? No, I think you might... Maybe you thought I said something else. I wouldn't say that the serpent isn't Satan. I would say that he is Satan. But no, there was this thing that... Look, that people don't... These people are so desperate. It's mostly Presbyterians, because most of them are just like in love with doctrine in general as a systematic theology, and they're part of their religion. Like, it's just being smart and having a systematic theology is just a really heavy part of their religion, is all that is. You know what I mean? And so they want to try to excuse God of having created Satan the way that he created him, which is not necessary, you know. And so the idea, what I was talking about is, somebody asked, why did Satan choose to be the serpent? Oh, what do you mean, why did Satan choose to be the serpent? Satan didn't choose to be the serpent. Right? God created the serpent. Right? And God is the reason that the serpent has Satan as a brain. Right? No, anyway, and then they just don't understand what I'm trying to say. And they want to just try to throw up these big caution flags about, but we can't say that, you know, God only permitted Satan to do what he was going to do, but he's not the author of sin, though. Well, you know, what do you mean? You mean God's not the author of sin from within this reality, like from within this dimension, like from within the material plane? Yeah, of course not. But did God author the things in his decree that are sinful? Yeah, absolutely he did. Right? Like the event that took place itself. And they're just so nervous about saying that. Like, they're Presbyterian systematic theology book is just going to like appear out of nowhere. Their idol is going to just appear, the God, out of nowhere and just strike them dead if they admit that, yes, God did and ordained the sin that happened that day. Like he decreed that sin, literally. He like it wasn't going to happen unless God put it in the decree that it was going to happen, right? So in that sense, yeah, God did author sin, and you don't have to be shocked. Oh no. Actually, guess what? That's part of the Westminster Confession. It's not part of the Bible at all that God didn't author sin. That's something that the Westminster forces on us. We don't have to affirm that. Now, of course, if you want to draw the distinction and say that God didn't author sin from the vantage point of this reality, right? God didn't author my sin from the vantage point of my reality. My sin is authored in universe by my own desires for sin, right? But God authored that story taking place, and the person that has a desire for sin, the circumstance of the sin tempting him, right? And then I just did exactly as decreed, right? But the decree isn't forcing me to do it. As they have trouble wrapping their mind around multiple dimensions, but it's not like God really, it's not like God embedded us with the ability to understand dimensions outside of our experience. I think he just might give some people the ability to think that way. I don't know, man. Not that anyone can really wrap their head all the way around it, but I mean, do you at least get what I'm saying to the basic level, Because inside of my universe where God has created me to live in, I have various desires, right? And I have various circumstances that led me to where I am today. And so, in reality, author of sin, various things, right? But out of reality, God's reality, author of, yes, even sin, God. And you can just tell the Westminster Confession of Faith that you just tell it, get behind me, Satan, when it lashes up to bite you and say, don't you ever say God is author of sin. Because there's no biblical warrant to make you just like shy away from being scared to explain how in God's decree he has a book in which he has established each of our days. And each of our days includes all the sins that we commit. Right? Psalm 139. And that's why I put that on the thumbnail. But, what was I about to do? Oh, I need to go make some leather bags. Or at least store the leather. And I have to use the bathroom. I said I was going to go camping out there, but I forgot I was going to do that. I gotta use the restroom. What the guy really had a problem with that I said was that God embedded his personality into the serpent upon creation. But like, how isn't that obvious to every Christian? God's the creator, right? Where'd your personality come from? God made it, right? Where'd Satan's personality come from? God made it, right? As he was creating him, right? As Christians, we would affirm that. Are we just going to make ourselves, some modern Christians today are, a lot of them at least, in mainstream Christianity, are willing to make themselves say very illogical things, very things that are just like embarrassingly stupid, like a creature would, create its own personality. Even what we understand about how our personality is embedded in our DNA today, we know that, right? It's not debatable, right? In Christian circles it is, because they don't know that we know that, unfortunately. Yeah, Bo, you said it good. God uses all things, even Satan, for his purposes. Anything outside of that is unbiblical. Everything serves God's purposes. Sorry about that, guys. I don't know what it was. As soon as we started this stream, I just got ravenously just hungry. Just so hungry. Yeah, so if God only knows possibilities of the future, then he's learning new things every day, right? God's just constantly taking in new information. What happens in God's mind when he takes in new information? He changes, right? And so while they're going to make like human freedom the standard, that if something affects human freedom, it can't be true. that we're actually going to do the other thing. We're going to say that if something affects God's eternal knowledge of all things, the fact that God is unchanging in his nature, if something affects that, it has to go. Not if something affects libertarian free will, it has to go. That's why we call it a man-centered theology. That's how you can know what's the standard that everything else is measured by. And their starting place is, I believe that I have libertarian free will. That's the starting place of my theology. Now, I have to build a structure that is internally consistent with that, no matter what I have to do. And anything that approaches it has to go from Scripture. It just has to go. The Bible never defines freedom as the power to do otherwise. It defines freedom as acting according to your nature. You have the freedom to act according to your nature. You don't act like a duck. I guess you could act like a duck, but probably just temporarily to prove a point that you could. But that's a philosophical discussion for another day. But a sinner is a slave to sin, John 8, right? Cannot please God, Romans 8. Not without God's grace. So open theism relies on a philosophical definition of freedom, which is completely outside of Scripture, libertarian free will. The Bible never describes it. The Bible doesn't support it in any way. And so, it's more of an attempt to refute just the standard biblical worldview. That's why even Gemini was like, okay, so here's the challenge for the biblical worldview to refute this. It wasn't like, here's the challenge for a Calvinist to refute this. It wasn't the challenge for a classical theologian. It said the challenge for the biblical worldview to refute this is this. Isn't that funny? So Gemini, the Pro AI, and during its research can recognize that this is not the biblical worldview. And we'll go into more about how it's able to recognize that by the argument that it's presenting us here. I'm going to check out the chat really quick. So I did change the channel branding, the picture, and the banner. I guess I can go sell some bags. See what I can make off of it. Do I have my bags? Okay, so I guess this is called the truth maker principle. Oh, we already talked about that. If Peter were placed in the courtyard. Sorry. Hasker's modal argument. William Hasker formulated a rigorous modal argument to demonstrate this incompatibility, often called the argument from the necessity of the past. These guys, it seems like they're really going so far out of their way to try to prove this beloved doctrine of libertarian free will. You ever wonder why they have to have it so bad? Yourself, if you're listening and you believe in the free will doctrine, do you ever wonder? Do you ever wonder why you need it to exist so bad? If you're like an open theist and you hear how, like, in its arguments, it's like if anything approaches libertarian free will, then, like, if there's anything, any idea, any doctrine that refutes or is not compatible with libertarian free will, it has to go. Have you ever stopped to consider why that is? Or you've just accepted that as the baseline? I don't see why. So, premise 1 for the necessity of the past. The past is fixed and unchangeable. If God believed in the year 1000 BC that Jones will mow the lawn on Tuesday, that belief is a hard fact of the past. That he believed he would? What? What do you mean God believed that he would? See, that's why open theists aren't Christian in general. They serve a different God for sure. To even say that God believed it would, like, God believed he would do that, but to say it in that way, as in, like, not like he believed it as in he was strongly confident, but he believed it would happen as in, like, it's a matter of probability or something. It's not even the same God. Not even the same God. No wonder they hate us so much. It's clearly a completely different religion. So, you know, if you have a certain idea of God and then you hear someone describing God in a completely different way, your defenses are going to immediately go to max, you know. Premise 2, divine infallibility. It is impossible for God to hold a false belief. Premise 3, transfer of necessity. Since God's belief is a past fact necessary and implies the future event, Jones mowing, the future event becomes necessary by consequence. Jones is not able to refrain from mowing the lawn. If Jones could refrain, he would have the power to either change the past, God's belief, or make God a liar. Since he can do either, he is not free. Open theists argue that classical attempts to evade this, such as Occamism, calling God's belief a soft fact, dependent on the future, fail because they rely on a future that, under presentism, does not exist to ground the belief. Therefore, to preserve libertarian free will, of course, it's always in an attempt to preserve libertarian free will, but why? One must deny EDF, that's exhaustive, definite foreknowledge. The future must be open for the agent to be free. Well, there you go. You know what I mean? Now support the idea. They say that as if it's just common knowledge. Like, you know what I mean? Just for humanity to be free. All right. Well, you're not free. You're a slave. You're a slave of sin. Look at that arrow I made. Pretty cool. Anyway. I mean, I feel like Hasker's modal argument is contradictory to their view of time, to their ontology of time, because it's the part where it says it implies the future event becomes necessary by consequence. Okay, if it's necessary, then it exists. Now, the idea that God is distinct from creation and unchanging is not just Platonic, by the way. That's one of their biggest claims, is that that's an idea from Plato. That's not true. Right, that's from Isaiah, and that's Jewish tradition as well. Numbers 23, God is not human that he should lie, not a human being that he should change his mind. Malachi 3, for I, the Lord, do not change. Therefore you, O children of Jacob, are not consumed. Right, so that immutability is not Plato. That's Isaiah. That's Malachi. Those are the prophets. That's old, actual Judaism. Not to be confused with fake modern Judaism. Now, anthropomorphism is absolutely necessary when you're talking about God. So one of their biggest arguments, let's see if I can find, like, where is Gemini Pro's version of their... the Hellenization. Okay, so let's move to the biblical case. The most compelling arguments for open theism are exegetical, it says. Okay. I don't know if I would go that far. But, look at this deer. I don't know where he went. Proponents argue for a hermeneutic of realism, taking the biblical narrative of God's interactions at face value rather than dismissing them as metaphorical accommodations. Yeah, that's the part that I wanted to talk about, where they refuse to say that assigning God human traits is anthropomorphism, but what else could it possibly be, right? That is the exact definition of anthropomorphizing something, is to assign human characteristics to something that is not human. Anyway, so their idea is the Hebrew word nakam, often translated as repent, relent, or regret, appears frequently in reference to God. Open theists argue this word indicates a genuine change of mind and volition based on changing circumstance. An example they use in Exodus 32:14, after Moses intercedes for Israel, the text states, "So the Lord changed his mind," which is nakam, changed his mind, about the harm which he said he would do to his people. And so the idea is, if God exhaustively knew he would not destroy Israel, his threat to Moses, "Let me alone, that I may consume them," was disingenuous. It reduces the prayer of Moses to a charade. For the narrative to have integrity, the threat must have been real, and the future must have been open to two possibilities, destruction or mercy. God's decision was contingent on Moses' intercession. Right? And that sounds on the surface like a strong argument, but here's the problem. They're confusing God's interaction with Moses as his decree. Right? They're confusing him having a conversation with Moses as also the time that God declared the end from the beginning. How's that? How's that the same thing? God speaking in time to Moses is not the same thing as God making an eternal decree from the foundation of the world. Right? It sounds like it could be possible when you're reading it, but when you really break it down like that, it immediately shows how silly even saying it is, right? It's very silly. That's the confusion. It's like every time God speaks, they're like, "Oh, well, look, the decree has two options." Right? God's not giving that. God's not speaking the decree right now. He's having a conversation right now in time with Moses. It's irrelevant to the decree. It's the conversation is decreed. Like the things that God is saying to Moses is part of the decree too. Right? But of course, you couldn't possibly ever consider that notion unless you ever got to a place where just for a moment you considered that God was outside of our universe and outside of our time while making this decree. Unless you ever got to that place, you would never be able to consider the remaining logic, the logic that follows the rest of it. You got to get there first, right? That's why your starting place has to be God as described in the Bible. Not your starting place is man as imagined by myself. Like I imagine that I have this super libertarian free will power, and because I imagine that I have that, that's my standard of theology. Like that's the starting point. Everything else has to help me prove that that's true. And if it doesn't, I don't believe it. What do you mean? Oh, cool. Looks like it glitched. Infinite arrow glitch? Oh no, I'm grabbing it. Silly me. I need to come across some, like, bison or whatever. Moose. There's a moose right there. I think I got him right in the head. Yeah, that was a hard shot. He's disoriented. Okay. I shot the tree, so that's good. Big trophy on that one. $20 leather, 40 meat off just one. Oh yeah, that's, oh, I'm in the bison area right now. Yeah, that's how you make it out here in the old Medieval Dynasty. You know, you can take your time. You don't have to rush and get a big settlement up. I think I've exaggerated that to its maximum capacity with 30-day seasons. Yeah, exactly. Hudson is a prime example of they're even willing to go so far as to lie to make their theology work, which is kind of scary. And say that God is fatalistic. So fatalism is like a philosophy that you would come to that's like all of history, your life is going in one direction, and there's no point to life now because you can't change what it's going to be. Well, that's not the philosophy that someone would come to if they believed that the purpose of reality was to glorify God, and that was a good thing. Someone like Hudson, glorifying God is a negative thing because he hates God. And so that's why it would immediately, that's not just a random insult, that's why it would come to the conclusion of fatalism, because you hate God. His glory being served through reality is not a positive purpose for you, it's a negative purpose. Therefore, you come to the philosophical conclusion of fatalism rather than something like, oh, I don't know, I thank God for all things because they're leading to his glory, like a biblical philosophy. See, let's go into fatalism a little bit more, because fatalism is an idea you come to now because of this deterministic worldview you found yourself in. You're still latched on to the idea internally that your life is the main purpose, right? That what you're getting out of life, the story of your life, that's like the main thing of reality. It all goes back to just having a man-centered theology in general. Now, I made 30-day seasons because I just love the realism of it. Even though seasons are more like, 3 to 4 months or something. I can spend some time just standing around doing nothing and I don't really have to worry about it. I'm not here to do the developer's challenge of progressing at the game's pace. I'm just here to relax, kind of exist in this little world here while we discuss theology. It's easier for me to respond and to read stuff in a game like this than it is Skyrim. We'll still play Skyrim, and I'll still do like my late night sleep streams when I don't have something to talk about. Yeah, but those open theists, man, they don't ever it's hard to get a real position out of them, and all they do is just come in and try to get under your skin. It's like that's all they can do. Like try to back you into a corner or something with some kind of really poor logic. I need to go ahead and chop down some more wood, though, so that I can... Wow, do I have that many? Oh, I can use my... That's a cool update. I can now use my storage to build stuff, even if I'm not at my storage. Like I can use resources remotely, I guess. Yeah, we're at about 2 hours now. So we'll go ahead and call it for this stream. Just because we're actually dealing with some actual arguments here, not just chilling. And so I'm going to end this one and let it finish uploading, and then I might start another one to do a more casual. And I know it's not like we went strictly through that or anything, but we'll continue to go through that in the next, not the stream I'm about to make. That's going to be a chill stream, but in I don't know, tomorrow or the next day or something, we'll keep going through that argument, keep thinking about it. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. And as soon as this finishes uploading, I'm going to start a new stream that's just more chill. Either